welcome to the first track of the digital creator section of our day. We're excited to have you guys here. And yeah, that was nice. There's a silent presentation in the room behind us where they're all wearing those disco headphones. So if you hear noise but no talking, that's what's going on back there. Okay, so logistically, we are going to do about a 30-minute panel discussion, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, focusing on the war of talent as we all work to our digital transformation goals. And I'll tell you a quick story. I'm Allison Welch. I'm the head of enterprise at Twilio. And over the course of about 18 months that I've been with Twilio, I've hired 40 people. I did the stats with my recruiter. I think I've interviewed at least 150 through that hiring process. Does that sound like the right ratio? Mm-hmm. And every morning I get an email from the recruiter that says, today you have 2 interviews or 5 interviews, but it's literally every day. And you know, it's a thrill to be building such a great team, and it's such a good problem to have as a growth company. But it's also just one of the biggest challenges I find as I manage the business, engage with customers, and run all the other things that we run in our lives. Finding the right talent is so critical in building a great team. So I'm really excited to have our panelists here and our experts and my good friends. We have Andrea Barrett, who is the Chief Product Officer from Urban Sitter. And we have Doug Landis, who is the growth partner at Emergence Capital. And then we have Des Modametti, the head of developer marketing from Facebook. So I'm really, the dynamics of this panel are great because we have different representation, right? We have Doug, who works with Series A startups. He looks at businesses in a very early stage. We have a co-founder, an entrepreneur who built a business led by 3 women, which is fantastic. And then we have Facebook. Everybody knows Facebook. And I'll let Des take that from here.
I'm not Mark Zuckerberg.
Can we all welcome our panelists and thank them for being here? Great. Okay, well, we're going to kick it off. Let's see. The first question I want to ask is for Andrea. Where are my questions? We're going to start around the concept of what talent your organization needs. That's kind of the frame we'll start with. So how do you know you have the right talent and the right framework within your organization?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the short answer is it's really difficult, which I guess is why we're having this panel today and talking about it. But I mean, I guess I'll use a point of reference from my recent past, in that, you know, the feeling you get when you make a really great hire and a hire that's really important to your organization right now is like none other. I think, you know, you bring somebody in and they're able to immediately build trust with the entire team, with you, able to simultaneously relieve you of your stress or anxiety or duties in a specific area and allow you to focus on, you know, the things that are the most important at that time. And also they challenge the team and you as a manager to be better than you were before. And so that is really hard to find over and over again. But I think, you know, one of the things that I've learned is that, you know, you know pretty quickly when you've made an amazing hire. People will go out of their way to tell you what an awesome addition to your team this person is. It takes a little bit longer, and sometimes a lot longer, to realize that you haven't made an amazing hire and that maybe that person isn't going to be the right person in your organization for the long term. And I guess the other thing that I've learned is that it changes over time. And we're a small company. We're 30 people total. 15 of which are on my team. And what we've needed, the right people and the right roles, have changed dramatically from when we started the company 7 years ago to now. So you really have to, you know, be aware that change is going to happen, acknowledge it, and respond to it really quickly.
So along the lines.
Can I add something?
Yes,
to that?
please.
So number 2. So in the early stage, the 2 biggest reasons why companies fail is hiring and focus. And what I mean by hiring is hiring the wrong people at the wrong time, or the right person at the wrong time. And that can be super disruptive to an organization. It also can be super expensive. And so to your point of, you know, hiring, but it's all about being really clear about what you need to fill today and also what you're going to need in 6 months or a year. Now, I have a question for you. My microphone's not even working, so I don't even know why I'm holding on. Switch. Okay, cool. So question. Hey. What signals do you look for that help you identify whether or not you made a bad hire?
Yeah, on the bad hire front, people not saying something, people not answering a direct question about somebody's performance or how they feel about the addition of this person to the team says a lot. Especially as you get more junior in the organization, people will be hesitant about throwing someone under the bus. Speaking ill of somebody, especially if they've just joined the organization. So look for those gaps in praise and really dig into those points because there's a lot that's unspoken. I think, the other thing is it's so tough, and I'm interested to hear what Des has to say in a larger organization, but when you have a small team, you feel everything so much more. If someone leaves your organization, you feel it. If you make a bad hire and they're not the right culture fit, you feel it, and it affects the entire team. So you're really looking for toxic tendencies, toxic traits that are starting to trickle down into the organization, things that don't represent, your culture or your values as a small company. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm going to use an example from my past life, not at Facebook, but actually at Google. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that when you go through the hiring process there, it's pretty rigorous. I'm sure you guys have heard of it before. They do lots of interviews. They ask really crazy questions. But once you're in a role, and it's safe, it's not working for you, they are really interested in making you find a role that will work for you. And so even if it didn't fit in that role specifically, they look to see what your strengths are and say, hey, there might be another opportunity in a different division or a different group, and they're really good about mobility. At Facebook, it's a little bit different. I think when you don't have a perfect fit, we definitely go through a process where we get 360 feedback. We get it pretty quickly, actually. We do it really easily, ask an email saying, hey, give us 3 bullet points, what they're doing good, what they're doing bad, or not bad, I should say, that they could work on. And really kind of give them that heads up and be really honest with them. I think that's the other thing that's really hard to do is the honesty is the most important thing when you're having a new hire who comes on board to make sure that they really fit culturally as well as the work that they're doing at hand. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I think helps also is just having, it's not, you move away from the probation period and some of the things that maybe larger, older companies kind of typically do, but even in a small company, having a structure and being open about that with the new hire to say, hey, we're going to check in at 30 days, we're going to check in at 90 days, and really framing it as let's have a conversation about whether this is working for the both of us, right? So you're really explicit about your expectations, they're very explicit about what they were looking for in a role, and to invite that conversation about whether this is, not really the right place for them.
Yeah. I think doing that early on, if I can add,
Totally.
it breaks the ice and it makes it such a natural two-way conversation that's safe. You can talk about performance and if it's working or not and be really comfortable, open a conversation with your manager about that.
So to your point, regardless of the size of the company, it's all about expectation setting. And I think smaller organizations, if you guys are at a startup, it's often forgotten about. Or if you're a first-time founder, you don't even know it because maybe you're hiring teams kind of for the first time. Maybe you worked at a bigger company. But being really clear about, hey, here's what I expect. We're going to do a check-in at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And here's what I'm going to measure you against is so important because half the time you just end up going on a gut feeling I don't know if this is really working, but you don't have any real data to say, well, is this where we thought we were going to be or not? Because it's new for a lot of folks out there.
And it's really important not just for the conversation you're having with that individual, but for the rest of the team also. Because if you make that decision to say goodbye with somebody, to somebody after 90 days or whatever, somebody that's become friends, somebody that people really like working with, it's really helpful to have something to point to and to say these are the specific areas in which it just didn't feel like a fit, and it helps to explain everything much.
It's funny, I just realized also internationally there's some work law practices like in Singapore, they actually do have a 90-day threshold to see things are working. And I think it's a really good measure to do on a global basis as well too. So you have teams internationally, you can still put that in place as well to kind of do those check-ins either 30, 60, 90 days, which I think is important.
Great. So we're talking a lot about the post-hire. You guys have made the hire, you've got them in the door, you're really excited, you see that you're weighing whether it works or not. How do you talk about, or how do you think about the attracting the talent? So let's start with you, Andrea, in terms of, one, I'm super interested about how you attract a diverse organization from an engineering perspective, since you run the product and engineering part of the business.
Yeah, as you can imagine, so we're looking for engineers to build our product, and we are a babysitting site, right? Like our product is less sexy to a lot of engineers in the Bay Area than others might be. And we are aware of that. And we talk about that really openly, and we have that conversation with the candidates that come in. And so I think, the advice that I would give to everyone is be really aware and honest about what you are and what you aren't, right? And so I want everyone that's coming in the door to understand, what our culture is, how we operate as a company, what they should expect to get out of their experience at our organization. And so for us, I really lean into I'm looking for mission-driven people. Mission-driven people tend to be really attracted to our business. They want to help mothers get back into the workforce. They want to help young people who are in school pay their way through school and pursue creative passions and things like this with side gigs. And these people, they're men and they're women. And so really leaning into that portion of our business, I think, has been successful for us. And then I'm also really open about the experience that they will have coming into our company. And I will go so far as to say, look, when you're coming in, I can't guarantee that your stock options here are going to be worth anything in the future, right? We're going to work like hell to make sure that they are. That's the whole reason that we're here. But any founder that tells you that they can guarantee that is lying, frankly. So I lean into but what you're going to get on a small team is this exposure to all aspects of the business. You're going to get the opportunity to make decisions that you wouldn't at a Facebook, for example, because you're not quite there yet, and it's going to take you a while to get that role. And so people who are attracted to a company like ours are hungry for those experiences, and they're eager and they're proactive. And so you really have to lean into that as opposed to the things that are maybe a little different from your competitors.
Can I add something?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm never short on words, as my friends know. So if you guys are hiring and you're conscious about hiring diverse candidates, I'm going to make a recommendation. There's a company out there called Textio. And Textio's whole purpose is ensuring that you're actually attracting the right level of candidate and the most diverse candidate for your organization. A lot of times when we're writing job postings, we're writing them and they end up sounding just like us. So if I'm a male developer and this is all I do, then that's how I'm going to write it. And that's going to attract other people just like me. And that's actually not the best working environment to create a highly effective organization. So what Textio does is actually reads through your job postings and then makes recommendations based on different words that you can use to make it more feminine or attract a more specific candidate or a more diverse candidate. So check it out, because part of your job postings will get people to pay attention to your organization. Like, is this sound like the kind of company I want to work with? Am I going to be able to have the kind of impact that I want to have? Is it at the right culture? Does it have the right values? And how you communicate that to a broader audience digitally is super important. So check it out.
It's really subtle but important.
Yeah, totally.
Anything to add there?
I
see you at the edge of your seat.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I worked at both Facebook and Google, and I think at Google they used to get 1 million resumes a day, which was kind of insane. I don't know at Facebook what the numbers are, but I will say that we do a ton of advertising on the platform, of course, about careers. And we do talk about the diversity of all the different people who work at the company, but more importantly, we also talk about the technology. So we always try to talk about the immersive new stuff that we're working on, a lot of open source, a lot of AI, AR, VR, you name it, basically, because we do want to attract top talent, but we also want to get people excited about the technology itself and get them to want to learn and come and work for the company. So that's what we typically do. We do a lot of online ads.
Des, do you have any comments or experience around competing for the talent? So I would think at Facebook you have crazy competition with the engineering quantity of engineers that you're sourcing.
Yes.
Looking at it globally.
Yes.
Any advice for the audience around?
It's funny. I think a lot of it comes down to culture, to be honest with you, because the things that they're offering are pretty much the same across the board when it comes to compensation, as well as I guess location, wherever you are to some extent. I think the biggest thing they come to do is meet the people and who they're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis and learn about what the company's beliefs are and if they really believe in that as well too. And so that's, I think, what really differentiates compared to like the Googles and the Amazons, the Microsofts of the world.
Okay, great. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, culture, talking about building a group of people that you're working with that help you scale, but also build a really great culture. In early stages, Doug, how do you think about, or how do you advise companies to think about building sales and engineering culture, cohesiveness? Does it matter at that stage?
Well, I mean, so we invest in Series A and Series B stage companies. They're anywhere from 6 to 30 some odd people, individuals. At that stage, culture is the people who are in the room. It's not, you don't have the distinct functions of sales and engineering and everybody's, we're all just partying together and living and dying with each other. What's really interesting though, right around the Series B, we get together with the executive team and we work on kind of mission, vision, and values. Most people in the early stage, maybe even at your company, and if you're super early, you probably have a list of values that you wrote up on your whiteboard. You're like, oh, this sounds important, so we care about this, get shit done, and don't piss anybody off and put out good product, whatever it is. But that changes and evolves over time. And it's not actually until you start to grow and you hit this like product market fit and you're really starting to accelerate your growth that you realize, well, what do we stand for? Who are we as an organization? And an exercise that actually we did with the Twilio sales team is answering the question of like, why do we exist? Like, why do we exist? And oh, by the way, as an individual, why do I work here? Why do I want to continue to work here? Because it's a really important exercise, is to define kind of your purpose for being, because that's what you use to attract talent. This is why we exist. This is what we're doing in the world. And do you want to be a part of it or not? And so that's a really important kind of stage in a company's growth, but it usually doesn't happen until you're about Series B-ish, maybe 40, 50 people. You realize like, what are we doing? We're not, I guess we're building a company.
Slight plug for Doug. If you go on, just search for storytelling, bring your weekend self to work. That's one of my favorite challenges that Doug set for my team. I had him come in and talk to my team a couple of weeks ago. And just, we all move into sort of work mode during the week, but company's culture can be improved if you bring yourself into the building and continue to carry that through. So I think that you have a great way of thinking about culture. Anything to add on culture from either of you guys?
It really matters.
Yeah.
And it really does. It's funny. I think about even for my own team and like the area that we cover, we work on the developer side. And what really matters to us is telling the story of the developer and really like bringing that home. And we all believe in it and telling that narrative and just showing off the tech because of the developer. So that belief is so strong. And I think when you have a team dynamic, you want that all to be consistent, that everyone believes in it. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing I would say is it's important to have that consistency.
Yeah.
Can I add one more thing about culture?
Yeah.
So just so you guys know, from a culture standpoint, there's actually like 3 different levels of culture. There's your company culture. There's also a manager culture. If you're a manager, there's a culture amongst managers because you can't really tell your team absolutely everything, right? Like what's your head count and who's on the chopping block and how we, how much capital do we need to raise? Are we going to run out of money, all that kind of stuff. There's also a customer culture, the culture of all of your customers together. And so it's important that you're really thoughtful about the fact that culture permeates multiple threads throughout your organization: company, manager, individual contributor, and customer. And be really mindful about what those are, because you want to try and align them all together.
All right, so speaking of managers, one of my questions, how much time do you think, and this is for anyone, how much time do you think a manager should be spending on hiring versus running their teams? How do you advise on that, and how do you monitor yourself as a manager?
Well, you were just saying this too, on a daily basis. I hate to say this, we're pretty much interviewing a ton.
Yeah.
I think you have it like a couple, 2 to 5 a day.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the same boat. On a given week, I'm pretty much interviewing 3 to 4 days a week. So yeah, I think it's important to kind of bring in talent as much as you can, especially if you have the headcount, and talk to as many people as possible.
And I can speak to that a little bit from the opposite side. So, we don't have open recs all the time. We're a small team. We don't have an unlimited budget, and so it's different. We actually go in cycles, and we'll be fully staffed for a long period of time, and there'll be some sort of turnover, and then I have to kind of jump back into that process. It is a huge time suck, and we don't have the money to invest in a lot of recruiters and things like this. So we have to do it ourselves, and we have to do it really efficiently. And so what we've come to understand is just crazy documentation documentation, on reminding ourselves, the last time we did this 6 months ago, here's how we went out and found the talent. Here's the types of emails that I was sending out to the people. Here were the questions that I was asking, the screening process, so that it's at least as streamlined as it possibly can be. And, as much as you can, depending on the resources on your team, get other people involved, because, as the hiring manager, of course, you have to be a part of the equation, but you shouldn't be the whole thing for a number of reasons. And so find ways that other people can take part in that too, because it's a good experience for them as well. This is part of that learning. And
I think they also, having your team participate, you hear things, you see different sides of an interview. A candidate can behave really differently with a manager versus a peer that they would peer with, or even a subordinate. And those are really interesting characteristics that can come out in a multifaceted interview process. So I like that a lot.
Something to add to that. You should always be hiring. You should always have a bench. And in your notes, you should actually identify who are our tier ones, like who are our top candidates that we actually want to keep warm and nurture. And those you stay in touch with all the time. Invite them to events, because at some point in time, you would love to make them a part of your organization. It may not be now, it may not be for a few years. But if you can kind of manage them as if you're managing a customer, right? Then you can put them in a nurturing kind of campaign and nurturing process. Because you like pipeline, right? Because hiring is really effing hard, especially here in the Bay Area. It's super hard. But I will also add, use your board. Please use your board, use your investors. Like, part of 30% of my job is nurturing my network to help find talent for our portfolio companies. And so I'm constantly talking to people. So if you need people, ask me, because I know a lot. It's a big part of it.
All right, so turning to retention. Retention is also part of the fight, right? We bring them in, we do all of this enablement, investment. They start to produce, we're excited. Somebody wants to take them away to the next thing. How do you guys think about any unique points of view on retention, virtual work, creative retention techniques that you can give away?
I have this really great article that I forget who writes it, but I will send it. I don't know if I can get it to you guys, but to give you the gist of it. It's basically about how a lot of people just want to keep moving up in the working world. They want to continue getting promoted. They continue wanting to get more scope. Sometimes not even when they're ready to get that. But one thing that's really interesting, they want it, just millennials, I know, I was just going to say, it's very true. But no offense, no offense. But it's one of the things that I love about the article. It talks about, like, why are you trying so hard when you have about 40 years to work? Or depending on when you want to retire, right? And you're rushing into trying to get more scope and get to the next promotion. But if you really think about it and how you want to pace yourself in the work that you do, you don't need to try so hard. And one of the things I also tell, even for my team, is when they come to me and say, hey, I want to do something else, or I want to do something more, I say, well, what's your end goal? What do you want to do with your career? And they'll say, oh, I want to do X, Y, Z. And I say, well, what are the things that you can get here at Facebook that you can learn from that, and go to another team to learn from that so that you can take it in the next role? So I always think about, where they want to go and how we can help them to get there. But also, don't rush into it too. I also tell them, take your time. You don't need to retire at 40. Some people want to, and that's great. I wish I could do that. But at the same time, you want to learn these skills so that you can continue and be the best at what you can do. And at a certain point in your life also, that you stick with something that you really are good at and continue to be the best at that as well too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think part of it also is delivering on the culture that you sold. And so, if you're having those conversations as part of the onboarding process, the recruitment process, hey, this is collaborative, you're going to get access to this, you're going to be able to, make decisions about, X, Y, or Z. You really need to be able to deliver on that. And those, are typically things that will keep people around, sometimes too long. Frankly, which I think is a really interesting way to look at retention. I know when I came into this role, as a first-time founder, not having a lot of experience managing big teams before, retention to me really meant, good people around as long as possible. But I've really come to understand that that is actually not the strategy that you want. You want to keep good people around as long as it makes sense for them and for you. And it's actually, as a manager, it's part of your job to see the signs in someone that are leading you to believe and them to believe that it's no longer the right fit, and to start that process of managing them out or having those conversations very openly.
I believe in hire slow, fire fast. Get them out. If they're not a good fit, get them out, because it's toxic. But you have to know what you're measuring them against in order to actually make that call. But far too often, companies hang on to people way longer than they should, and it's expensive, and it's also really, really damaging to an organization.
And that's back to the culture portion too, because I feel like in a lot of cases, maybe someone has been a really high performer for a really long time, but then they get to the point where, you know, they're burnt out. Their attitude has just changed or whatever, right? So it's a different conversation, and that's where coming back to the culture, hey, we need people here who are passionate, who are engaged, who are this, that, and the other thing, and then you can have that conversation, you know, with a little bit more behind it, as opposed to just like, hey, what, you know, it doesn't feel good anymore.
Yeah, we were talking about honesty is such an important part of this as well too. Being honest with that person and letting them know, like, this is just maybe it's a different fit now, or maybe there's something else they might be more interested in. But as Doug says, I do think that you do need to kind of churn to get, you know, new ideas, new fresh ideas, and new people into place as well too.
Great. All right, we are going to open it up for questions. Thank you for your thoughts. Anyone want to lead off with a question for the panelists? There's one in the middle back there. We just need to get the mics because we're recording. Oh. Hopefully number 3 works.
Hi. My name is Kelly. I founded a company called Petal Fox. We're a lifestyle brand with a subscription and text commerce approach to getting flowers. And my question is about as a non-technical CEO, how do you think about building your technical team without having like full visibility to your entire tech stack?
Yeah.
How do you measure that? Are they any good? You can't read the code that they're writing. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah, happy to take that one. It's a great question, and I guess my short answer is be careful. It's really good that you're asking this question right now, and I think, you know, if there were one thing I could do over in terms of building this product, it would be exactly along these lines. We were not technical founders. The way that we went about it, I think in hindsight, was not ideal, and I say that because we didn't have the right checks and balances in place, honestly. So I think what you need to do is you need to use your network. You need to find people you trust, even if they are technical, CTOs or whatever that aren't going to be a part of your team. You need to set them up as mentors or what have you, and you need to make sure that you understand enough and have enough access, enough oversight to understand the technical decisions that are being made. And then, you know, from there you can find people to come in if you need to have contractors or whatever. But you need to be a part of that decision making as much as possible.
Good question.
So leverage other people to do it. Yeah. Or investors, get people from other companies, other technical leaders from other companies to come in and do the interview for you. But sit in on it so you understand what questions are being asked and what answers you should expect.
Hi. On the hire slow, fire fast comment, I was just wondering if you could speak to a little bit to the negative consequences of doing that and how it might impact employee morale.
Employee culture is worried about one thing, their job, right? So if you're firing fast, of course, it's going to make people nervous. So part of it is about being transparent with the culture that you're creating, which is like, look, we want to work with people who want to be here, who are adding value, and also who align with our values. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be everyone at all times. And we're going to make changes across the organization that you may not fully understand. I believe in transparency. Like, a lot of times somebody leaves and no one ever talks about it. Yeah. It's bullshit. Talk about it. Why did that person leave? Well, guess what? They got a better opportunity. Maybe, it wasn't a good fit anymore. It was like, talk about it, because when you don't talk about it, then everybody sits around the water cooler and like, well, what the hell happened? And then it's like, oh, did you hear? And all this shit starts flying around because we're just worried about, are we next? Right? And so if you create that culture of transparency where it's like, look, we're going to be super clear about our expectations. And if you're not meeting them, then we're going to have a conversation and here's our process. And if you're in that process, well, guess what? It may be time for you to find something else, right? Because people are the most important part to your business.
I also, to add to that, I think fire fast is not a negative for the people who are still here in the building. It's you're building the best team possible, and you're really concerned about your team's success and their ability to succeed. And if you find that there's a misaligned hire, by moving them through transitioning out of the business, you're actually giving the rest of your team the ability to succeed even more. So that's another way to think about it is, you're developing your team while you're managing tough conversations.
And I 100% agree with everything that you said. I also think that it's not just about, am I next? I think there's also an element, because people don't know everything. So if there's somebody that they thought was a rock star and all of a sudden the next day they're gone, especially if you're in a small organization, especially if you're not a technical founder, especially if that person, was an engineer, you might be leaving the organization with questions about you as a leader, right? So you do need to be more transparent about the process, and not even if you don't feel comfortable going into the details about what happened with this individual, at least make sure people understand there is a process. These are the types of things we're looking for, the types of things we're checking in about. And then, it can actually be used as an opportunity for people to say, oh shit, I work for people who really know what they're doing, right?
And they care.
And they care.
They care about everybody, not just the rock stars.
Yeah.
Question.
Hi. When you're working in a small team and you're kind of delivering 110% all the time, how do you stop from burning out in such a small team where, yeah?
Any tricks to clone yourself? Someone told me the other day to listen to things at 1.5 speed, like to give me more time in the day, like recorded, we were doing QBRs. No, I'm kidding. That's not a solution.
Yeah, yes, we deal with this a lot at work. And I think the biggest thing that we try to do is take time out and make the entire team take time out. So you guys are going to laugh, but we recently did a writing exercise about where we wanted to be in a year. And so we went out and took 3 hours, went up to the rooftop and basically sat together, and everybody had their own little corner and wrote for a good, solid hour and a half. And then we came back together and, had drinks afterwards. And it was nice. It's just taking that time out together so they don't feel pressure that it's, just them doing that on their own time. So I think that helps a lot, and do it frequently if you can. So
To that point though, as well, as an organization, it starts at the top, right? So are you the boss? One of the managers. So create the culture on your team that if we hit a certain milestone, we're all taking a half day Friday, right? So reward everybody with time off or free time to go do something that they would rather be doing versus working on this particular project, and start to create that culture of time off is one of those rewards that we're going to continue to use as an organization because we all value how important it is.
And I'd say also set an example. Sorry to cut you off there, but somebody, a manager on my team recently was, I saw it, and he was not in a good place. He was burnout. And so, he took a week off, and it was time for him to take that vacation that he hadn't, planned for before, but it was really important for him. And I encouraged him, and he did, to share this with his team, right? Hey, this is what I've seen in myself recently, and this is what I'm gonna do about it, because you need people to understand that that's okay.
That's good.
Hi, my name's Doug. I'm with Unify from Barcelona in Catalonia. I've been a company owner in 11 different countries, and I've had baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, and Generation Z. I'm fascinated with Generation Z now because they're becoming much more loyal. You made a comment, I can't remember, someone said millennials. Now I see it's the Generation Z that we're employing, so I very much like your thoughts on how you've adapted company culture to change from the millennial attitude to the now more loyal Generation Z attitude.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I mean, I'd say part of it is, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard to find where the lines are, right? But I think, and especially in a lot of the younger people that we've hired recently, it's actually worked to our advantage. I see a lot of really mission-driven young professionals. It's a lot of what's going on in the world and what have you. So, that works for us because we are a company where that can really be a part of what you do.
I can add to that. So one thing that's important is everybody is motivated differently, right? So as a manager, it's super important to find out what specifically motivates everybody on your team, and then you want to manage towards that, right? So millennials, they want to get promoted, they want the recognition, they want to know that they're the shit. Great, okay, cool, here you go. So what does that look like? Whereas Generation Z, they're super loyalists, right? And so they want that deeper relationship. Maybe they want the dinner with the CEO or with you, so it's a matter of just finding what works for each person on your team, and then targeting that. That's one approach.
Yeah, actually, Doug hit something that I think is really valuable, is that with the loyalists, they do want that attention with either the leader or whoever it may be. And I noticed we have a lot of people in AI that are 19 years old, 20 years old, that just are graduating from college or not even quite graduated yet, who are working in this space. And it's a fascinating thing to see, but a lot of it's because they love the tech, but more importantly, they're working with people that are the founders of this space, right? And so the mentors, exactly, they're learning from these people, and that's what they want. They want to be able to grow with their career, and so that's the thing that they value most. And if you can share that and then give that to them, I think they'll love that.
You touched on something which is often overlooked and really hard to do, but mentorship in organizations is so incredibly important. Because the manager individual contributor relationship has its own challenges, but mentors can certainly connect and engage with people in a way that other folks can't. So start to create that culture as well. Hard to do because it's hard to measure, but it's also super important.
Any other questions? All right.
How do you guys go about constructing an interview process that selects for the right type of candidate? For example, I think this is especially problematic for technical roles because you have this standardized format that seems really disconnected from the type of work that a software engineer, for example, would do. So yeah, how do you guys go about constructing that process?
So I'm not going to speak directly to the technical piece, but there's a model similar. So on the sales side, as an example, people tend to ask the same damn questions if you're looking for a salesperson, right? So it's like salesmanship. Tell me about the last time tell me about the biggest deal you did. I think so. A model that I built that we give to all of our companies is let's break out the 5 core buckets of characteristics, right, that matter. So it's beyond salesmanship, it's culture fit, it's emotional intelligence, it's coachability. So what are those big bucket characteristics? And then what are all the sub-characteristics that live in there? And then you prioritize them 1 to 5. So in some organizations, coachability is more important than salesmanship. Other organizations, EQ is more important than coachability, as an example. And then I built interview questions and exercises to ask for each one of those categories. And then I built a weighting system for it. So then you can get a score. Anything over 70%, they're a good hire. They're 70% because they're a higher aptitude in salesmanship and coachability. They don't have the best EQ, but we can work on that. On the technical side, I imagine there's a model that you could probably follow that's somewhat similar, meaning what are the core characteristics that you look for besides just their technical aptitude? And I'm guessing you have something like that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think you touched on something that was really important is get a lot of different people in the organization involved in the process, especially people that are going to be more junior than the person that you're bringing in, if that's important to your organization. Candidates do behave differently depending on who they're talking to. It's a little bit like how you treat a waiter at a restaurant kind of a thing. And so we take that into consideration. And I really like your point about, weighting and finding the characteristics that are specific to that role in that organization. And I think there are a couple of things that as an organization you can probably pull out that are kind of, deal breakers, right? And really push on those because I think it's more important and sometimes easier to find those really red flags and then disqualify candidates based on that versus, really trying to make sure they're kind of ticking all of the boxes.
One thing to add, though, is if you have multiple people interviewing a candidate, please make sure that everyone is clear about what they're interviewing for. Again, everybody goes and they'll ask the same questions as the candidate. You're like, okay, cool. We only dug into one area, but make sure that everyone has a different area that they're digging into, and a way to measure that, right? So you can't just say like, go interview for their coding ability. It's like, okay, well, how do you want me to measure that? Scale of 1 to 10. 10 is they're amazing, and 1 is they're terrible. Like, are they the right person to actually measure against that? So
I would add, do that early, because once you start, if you're hiring fast and you get into a high volume scenario, those processes that you don't think about at the beginning, it happens just naturally that everyone's asking the same questions and there isn't a rubric, and it can be really ineffective in that, oh, we didn't even check on this one little, this EQ wasn't something we inspected. We really looked at the sales performance, for example. So I've experienced that, and it's really important to build it from the ground up. So adding. I think we have time for one more question. We'll lose the room.
Hello? Again, it works. So in my experience as I've grown an organization, I find that as you hire someone for a job, they're good at that job, but then as you grow, let's say, the churn ups by 50%, just the scale of what you're doing is 50%, which is not, which is big, but it's not huge. So every time that goes up, someone suddenly can't cope anymore. And I was wondering, A, how do you manage that within an organization? Because we've gone through quite a lot of churn of just every time we've grown, having to hire new people, as in having to replace people. And B, is there a way in which you guys have techniques to hire people who can grow with you rather than who are good at a job but then can't really cope with either the pace or the skill level that's required at another level?
For the record, that was my question.
Oh, good.
What happens when the company outgrows the person?
yeah, train them.
Yeah.
It's not always that easy.
No, yeah, totally. I know.
And firing them is not always good too, especially at the executive level. I have a CFO that's good at $100 million. All of a sudden, 18 months later, they're horrible at $200 million.
Yeah, but part of that's, so for us in early stage companies, when we're looking at the company to potentially invest in, we're looking at the team and we're evaluating, are we going to have to replace this team or anybody on this team in the next 12 to 18 months? We're already thinking about that. So and we're training our CEOs to be thinking 12, 18, 24 months out. Who on your team are you going to need to up level or potentially replace? And that you're constantly evaluating that. And the people that you need to up level, you have to build a plan to how do we help them build the skill sets. It's the skill set that we need in the kind of the next iteration of our company if we're moving to Mach 2. In some cases, you can train them. Some cases, you got to manage them out. In some cases, you got to move them to a different role that just maximizes what their skill set really is. There's not a perfect answer. And that's why hiring is a constant, right? You always want to have a bench of people, because if those people aren't going to cut it, you got people that you can slot back in, that you can slot in there.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention life events can happen, right? Things happen that are outside of all of our control, no matter how well we plan. So just the constant bench building, I think, is critical for that as well.
Yeah, I was to add on to that too, is we look at the strengths, and if whatever that strength is, if they can do it in a different group, and then you can also rebuild from that team inherently as well. So it just depends. Again, there's so many factors in this whole situation. He's right. There's not one answer to say it. But yeah, constant hiring and just thinking about the future.
So thank you all for attending, and thank you guys for a great interactive panel. Enjoy the rest of your day. We're continuing on to the next digital transformation session. Excuse me. We're all creators. I'll leave it at that. Have a great day.